father was captain of the starship for 12 minutes.
He saved 800 lives, including your mother's. And yours.
I dare you to do better.
Welcome to another edition of my Components Breakdown video review series. Today we're going to take a look at Star Trek Expeditions, which is a cooperative board game that is set for 1 to 4 players and takes place within the new universe of Star Trek that's based on the 2009 movie. In the game, players will assume the role of one of the 4 bridge officers, including Kirk, Spock, Uhura, and Bones, in their attempt to respond to a neutral planet's diplomatic petition for membership within the United Federation of Planets. However, upon their arrival to the surface of the planet, the governing body is far less enthusiastic than the initial invitation might have suggested, which is solely due to the threat of a now very evident Klingon presence. In addition to the player's diplomatic duties within the game, the crew of the Star Trek Enterprise must now also deal with the ever-growing Klingon threat, as well as defuse the incurring civil war that is taking place within its population, all of which must be handled to their completion within the game's rigid 30-day timeline. Each of these 3 objectives are tracked on the mission board that monitors the group's progress as they complete captain's logs upon the planet's surface, with the decisions that the players make in the game and how they interact with their fellow officers affecting the outcome of the story as well as their final scores. Star Trek Expeditions is a HeroClix licensed game, but unlike what most gamers are accustomed to in this series, the figures and their corresponding character dials will now be turned based upon an officer's exertions within the game and the decisions that they make, as none of the 4 included officers can be killed. However, their skills in each of the game's 3 challenge types can be deteriorated rapidly due to various conditions, lessening their overall effectiveness. Also, unlike most HeroClix titles, Star Trek Expeditions is designed as an all-in-one, non-collectible board game, but is most definitely built upon the expandable model, meaning new missions, officers, crew members, and even HeroClix figures and ships can easily be designed for future introduction into the game. Let's start off by looking at the game's incredible set of components. Star Trek Expeditions come with some of the most polished sets of components in the business, all of which are perfectly organized and contained within an extremely user-friendly form-fitted insert. The included game board shows the surface of the planet Nibia and is divided into 15 separate areas, each of which will randomly hold both one face-down Captain's Log supplemental card as well as one face-up Discovery token. The Captain's Log supplemental cards represent both the locations and the events that players will discover and attempt to resolve during their turns, each of which describe a challenge that deal with one of the 3 main crisis types. Discovery tokens, on the other hand, depict the interesting people, artifacts, and the important clues that can be collected by spending a player's action on that particular space. There is also a second type of Discovery token, which are gold and are far more valuable to the team when they are collected. However, they are initially placed off to the side of the game board and will only enter play as a direct result of various circumstances that occur. The orbital track above the planet is likewise divided into 15 separate spaces, each of which contain an orbital value that is used for scoring purposes during the game's conclusion. During setup, both starships will have their bases turned to the maximum click value, with the USS Enterprise being placed on the 0-valued space of the planet's orbital track, while the Klingon battlecruiser will be placed on the +7 space. Each of the players will now choose or randomly assign themselves one of the 4 bridge officers, with multiple characters being played by a single person if there are less than 4 total participants. Each player will then take their corresponding character card and place it face up in front of them. Each of these character cards lists the officer's relevant skills and special abilities that are specific to the inherent strengths of their personality and their rank. Players will also take their matching HeroClick figure, again setting the dial to its maximum value and placing them directly on the game board's Enterprise space that is orbiting the planet. Each of the 4 officers at this time will also receive 2 random Energizer cards from the shuffled deck, which represent the resources that the officers can use from the USS Enterprise to assist them on their missions. Energizer cards come in a couple different varieties. However, most of them are going to consist of the Enterprise crew members and equipment, as well as clever tricks and tactics that the officers can use to enact special abilities during their turns. The game's progression is controlled and marked by a set of Stardate cards, in which each player on their turn will turn over and complete the actions that are listed. Stardate cards have 2 notable features. First are the amount of actions that the active player receives on their turn, which is shown on the card's upper left-hand corner. Second, each card has 3 levels of difficulty, and players must agree prior to this game's start which level that they wish to attempt, with blue being the easiest and red being the most difficult. Now there is a small caveat though to each of the higher 2 difficulty levels. For instance, picking yellow requires the players to take both the yellow and the blue actions of a Stardate card, while picking red, which is the hardest of the 3 difficulty levels, requires the players to enact all 3 levels when a card is revealed. Some Stardate cards also have the Stardate symbol located on its active block, which indicates that a day of time has passed for the Enterprise crew. Time is marked on the game board's time track, and after 30 days have passed, the game will end in defeat if the players were not able to complete all 3 missions inside of the game. The final set of components consists of the Captain's Log cards, the mission board, and the 3 special dice. The Captain's Log cards, which are not to be confused with the Captain's Log supplemental cards, which have already been placed face down on the game board, are the primary missions that the Enterprise crew are attempting to accomplish upon the planet's surface, and will initially be placed off to the side of the game board, and will only come into play when the appropriate supplemental log is revealed on the planet. Each of these logs, after the first mission, have branching paths to them, and depending upon the competency and timeliness of their completion in the game by the players, can drastically change the outcome and scoring within the game. The scores are tracked on the mission board, with each column representing one of the 3 major crises affecting the planet. Last are the dice, which consist of 2 white Federation dice and 1 black Klingon die. Both Federation dice are used during planetary challenges, and 1 die for starship combat, and are represented with pip values ranging from 1 through 5, with a special 7-1 facing that signifies an extraordinary exertion from the attempting officer or from the Enterprise at the penalty of 1 negative click on that dial. The black die is used each time the Klingon battlecruiser attacks the USS Enterprise, and has pip values ranging from 2 through 6, again with its own special facing, which represents the ship healing 1 click on its dial instead of attacking. Now that we've looked through most of the components, let's go ahead and briefly look at the gameplay. As I previously mentioned, Star Trek Expeditions is a cooperative-based game where players will either win or lose as a team, and only by working together to fully complete the game's 3 missions will they be able to keep the planet Nibia safe from falling into the hands of the Klingon race. Through the course of the game, players will beam down to the planet's surface in an effort to perform each of these required missions, scoring as many points as they can depending upon how well they perform those missions and the timeliness of their completions, as players will need to act quickly due to the finite amount of turns that are allowed and tracked by the game's Stardate mechanic. At the same time, players must continually monitor and protect the USS Enterprise during its battle against the Klingon battlecruiser, to not only maintain a favorable position on the planet's orbital scoring track, but to also not let the Enterprise get destroyed, which would immediately end the game. Starting with the Captain Kirk player, turns are done in a clockwise order and are divided into 2 separate steps, which the active player must complete in this order. First, the player whose turn it is must complete a Stardate card by turning over the top card of the stack and resolving any events that occur in accordance with the level of difficulty that was chosen by the group at the start of the game. Now, there are several possible outcomes and events with each of the game's 14 Stardate cards, but there are 3 basic things that could happen, those being a Stardate, a Klingon attack, or a special event, and players will perform either 1, 2, or all 3 of these things depending upon the game's difficulty level. Second, the active player will take a number of actions as shown on the Stardate card's upper left-hand corner. Now, there are 10 different actions that are available in Star Trek Expeditions, and players may choose any of those actions from the list. However, some actions may only be performed in one of the two very specific locations and are marked accordingly. Players may even perform the same action or actions multiple times in a single turn, with the only exception being that they may either beam up or down from the Enterprise just once per turn. Now, a majority of the 10 actions in the game are very self-explanatory after reading through the rules. However, there is one action that is integral to the game's completion, and that is attempting and completing challenges, or in other words, missions. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail in explaining how this important mechanic is handled within the game. During the game, officers will face a number of these challenges, which appear on both the Captain's Log and the Captain's Log supplemental cards as they explore the planet's surface. Each challenge in the game has a symbol that tells players the type of challenge that they must face, as well as a target number that they must meet in order to succeed at that challenge. Each officer's corresponding figure has a click value for each of these three different types of challenges, and that number will fluctuate up and down as figures lose and gain clicks from their dials through various effects throughout the game. Players will also receive a number of different bonuses to their matching click value from a variety of different sources, including any pertinent crew or action cards that they have face up in front of them, any discovery tokens in their possession that match the color of the challenge type that's being attempted, as well as any matching skills or other officers within the same space as the officer attempting that challenge. Now, each of these bonuses are added to the officer's base challenge type number of their click value, and are further increased by the player rolling the 2 white Federation die and adding them to that total. And if that total is greater than or equal to the target number, then the active player has succeeded and successfully overcome the challenge and reaps any kind of rewards or benefits that are listed on that relevant card. Now, it goes without saying that some of the officers of the USS Enterprise are naturally better at attempting some challenges than others might be. So players are always encouraged to share resources amongst themselves and advise others of where and what they intend to do on each of their upcoming turns in order to really maximize the crew's abilities to their fullest, especially with the limited amount of time in the game. There are 3 ways in which a game of Star Trek Expeditions can end. Either by the marker hitting the final space on the Stardate time tracker, the Enterprise getting destroyed, or if the players are able to complete all 3 multifaceted missions within the game, of which they will score victory points at the end of the game in accordance to how well they performed each of those missions. Players' interest in Star Trek Expeditions will more than likely initially rely on several different factors, those being their history and experience with past HeroClix release games, their like or dislike of the cooperative style and genre of board games, and most obviously their love of the Star Trek universe. I'll start with the HeroClix license, which actually lends itself quite well to the mechanics and the design of the game, as all the important information about your characters are stored right there on your figure's base. All the included clicks are wonderfully sculpted and they're pre-painted, and have a very sturdy and rigid feel to them, blending the notion that they are quality-made products. And that quality doesn't just stop with the figures that the license is known for, but also includes all the other components in the game, from the thick cardboard pieces to the linen finished cards, and ending with the incredibly well-designed and usable insert. For fans of cooperative style of games, Star Trek Expeditions fits right into that same mold, and although it doesn't really inject anything new into the genre, it will pose a serious challenge to gamers on its highest level of difficulty, where just trying to keep the Enterprise alive is a real challenge in and of itself. For Trek fans, this is going to be a real gem in their collection, as its theme is really well captured in the majority of the game's components and design decisions, and it's perfectly suited for multiple expansions that can only serve to enhance and enrich the game's content and growth. Despite all these positive things though, I do have one initial concern as well that I feel needs addressing with whatever inevitable expansion is released down the line. That being that the amount of initial randomness in the game's structure really needs to be increased by introducing more Captain's Log cards, and especially Stardate cards, to account for a much greater variety of outcomes that can occur from one game to the next. All in all though, Star Trek Expeditions is definitely the best Star Trek game thus far, and should do really well not only in the enthusiast market for which it was intended, but also in introducing board games to a whole new group of gamers. So that is Star Trek Expeditions. I am Jeremy Salinas, and thank you very much for watching.